Dober večer, dame in gospodje, spoštovane, spoštovani, redni ali pa prvi gledalci naše oddaje od srede do srede v sredo. Tokrat je naš gost Tomaž Štih, znan tudi kot Libertarec, najverjetneje najbolj znani, najbolj eminentni slovenski libertarec, tako sem ga namreč tudi predstavil Stefanu Molinjuju, ko sem mu razlagal, kdo bo še drugi gost. Tomaž, hvala, ker si se odzval mojemu vabilu. Vedno mi je v čast in veselje.
Hvala za vabilo.
Torej, danes smo se zbrali, da bi, šalim se, s Tomažem so se pogovarjala, da bo danes v oddaji načela temo antifašistične histerije, ki se je, potem ko so se o tem dogovorila, še malo bolj zaostrila in pokazala tudi danes v Državnem zboru pri interpelaciji ministra Vaska Simonitija, kjer je recimo poslanec Marko Bandelli doživel skoraj da živčni zlom ali pa, ne vem, skoraj da ga je zadev infarkt ob tem, ko se je razburjal zaradi tega, ker naj bi nek od SDS-a ali pa od vlade ustanovljen medij samega sebe proglasil za fašističnega. Na drugi strani je danes državljan D, tip po imenu Domen Savič, o katerem bova tudi malo spregovorila s Tomažem, objavil tak precej fašistično objavo. Ne vem, jo bom probal deliti. Če se bo to videlo, ker se žal ne odpre celoti. Ok, državljan. Add to stream. Ne vem, zakaj ga zdaj ne doda. Share. Zanimivo. Ne doda ga. Ok, bom pa prebral. Torej, državljan D ali Domen Savič piše: če pogledamo intervjuje, ki jih tretjerazredni vloger že dolgo časa objavlja na svojem YouTube kanalu, če pogledamo izbljuvke, ki jih piše za madžarsko tovarno sovraštva, potem je stvar jasna. Manj jasno je, kako so liki kot na primer Jaša Enul, Sašo Dolenc, Sašo Hribar pristali na sodelovanje, pogovor z njim. Še več jih je državljan D. Manj jasno je, kako se navkljub večletnim opozorilom in vsebinah na kanalu tretjerazrednega vlogerja, kjer najdemo cel globalen bazen neonacistov / alt-right / nouvelle droite predstavnikov, v glavah prej omenjenih posameznikov ni prižgal alarm. Bodimo iskreni, toleranca netolerantnega je problem. Masturbacija z egom in iskanje medijske pozornosti tudi. Da s tem legitimiziramo neonacizem, sovraštvo, nestrpnost in ga umeščamo v našo družbo, se nikomu ne zdi problem, le njemu očitno. Kličemo torej na odgovornost, ne samo oklicane urednike fašističnih medijev, temveč vse tiste vidne predstavnike naše družbe, ki mu svojo prisotnostjo dajo legitimiteto. Vi ste krivi. Obsojamo, j'accuse, kolaboracijo s samooklicanimi uredniki fašističnih medijev, za katero ni in ne more biti izgovora. Ni vedela, je pa se, dokazov je več kot preveč. In potem je ta slikca, ne? Upam, da se bo tale videla. Se vidi, ne?
Se vidi, sam mene ni obkrožil. Nisem tako pomemben.
Nad livestream, no in bolje obkrožil nekaj ljudi, recimo dr. Michaela Jonesa, pa dr. Tomaž Suniča, Jareda Taylorja, Françoisa Garjepija in Frodija Midjorda, pa tukaj albanskega profesorja Olsija, njega je tudi obkrožil. Spodaj pa zdaj se na tej sliki ne vidi, pa so Jenul, pa vsi ti kot ne nacisti, ki jih obsoja za kolaboracijo. Ne vem, kaj so se vi učili, Tomaž, v osnovni šoli, pa vem, da so nas farbali o zgodovini skozi prizmo komunistov, ampak jaz sem si nekako na tak način predstavljal, da so izpostavljali Žide v nacizmu, kakor so nas učili pri zgodovini. In ne vem, kaj ti misliš o tem. Jaz se zelo nenavadno se počutim ob tem, ko me tale Savič takole.
Ja, to je dobrodošlica tej kulturi izbrisa v Sloveniji, ne. Očitno te nameravajo zbrisati, zaradi tega, ker delaš intervjuje, ki jim niso pogodu, ne. Zdaj, ko se govori toliko o tem fašizmu, ne bi bilo dobro nekako definirati, kaj danes antifašizem sploh je, ne. Veš, kaj te gospodje zagovarjajo, ne. In če se pogleda njihova dejanja, to se pravi, kako se gre aktivizem, je antifašizem danes predvsem boj za javni denar. To je to, ne. Se pravi, vse se začne in vse se konča pri javnih, parajavnih sredstvih, parajavna sredstva v bistvu, državna podjetja, NVO-ji, drugi prerazdeljevalni mehanizmi, ne. In so to porabo, ne, vse te stotine milijonov je treba nekako pravičati, ne. Protifašistično bojevništvo imaš problem upravičiti zato, ker od leta 1943 praktično ni več fašistov, ne. Veš, ne. In zato se dogaja nenehno, bom rekel, odkrivanje in izumljanje nekih novih zvrsti fašizma, ne. In skladno s tem antifašizem ni nobena koherentna miselnost, veš, ampak se prilagaja vedno tem novim zvrstem fašizma oziroma bolj fašistoizira vse razmišljanje, ne, ki ogroža njihovo proračunsko pozicijo. To je antifašizem v osnovi, ne. Naprimer, če se ti zdi ta javna poraba in davki previsoki, ne, si danes lahko proračunski fašist, ne. Če se ti zdi migracijska politika preblaga, ne, si lahko antimigrantski fašist, ne. Če se ti zdi recimo rušenje zidov med moškim in ženskim WC neumnost, ne, je to moški opresivni fašizem, ne. Če se ti zdi, da je vsaka feministka to samo do prvega pravega moškega, ne, je to mizogeni fašizem, ne. Skratka, teh fašizmov se je namnožilo, ne, ker jih potrebujejo, da s tem opravičijo svoj obstoj, ne. Z zgodovino, s tem, kar je nekoč v 30 letih prejšnjega stoletja, skoraj 100 let, bo čez 10 let tega, ne, bil fašizem, pa to nima absolutno nič, ne. In na koncu pridemo do tega, da je antifašizem danes enostavno vse, kar socialistom ni všeč, ne. Prosto po tistem pregovoru, sve je sranje osim pišenja, ne. To se pravi, mi smo socialisti in kdor ni z nami, je fašist, ne. In to je mogoče najbolj tragikomično pri vsej stvari, ne, ker če pa je fašizem zgodovinsko kaj bil, ne, je bil pa fašizem progresno gibanje. Fašizem je bil delavsko gibanje. Fašizem je bil različica socializma, ne, in to, da oni zdaj vsem naokoli očitajo nekakšen fiktivni fašizem, ne, je dejansko na robu humorja, ne vem, a se šalijo ali resno mislijo, ne. Tako da antifašizem je danes, bi rekel, poslednje pribežališče nič vredneža, ne. To je ideologija ničesar, ne. To je en neizprosen boj proti neobstoječemu sovražniku, ne. In vse to seveda za reden in dober državni denar in po možnosti za neprofitno najemno stanovanje v centru Ljubljane. To je definicija slovenskega antifašizma.
Jaz se v tega Saviča nisem preveč poglabljal, spomnim se ga potem na Dimku in spomnim se ga, da je izjemno agresiven in napadalni in teč 70 odtenkov konzervativnosti. nazadnje je robantil proti Romanu Vodebu, ki je samo proklamirani levičar, ampak ga ima za preveč konzervativnega glede spolov. Ne vem, ti kaj več spremljaš tega Domna Savič? Kdo je ta Domen Savič? Odkot mu?
Mislim, da imamo probleme z internetom. Bom počakal, da se spet pojavil, zaenkrat si izpadel. No, najbrž samo protifašistični bojevniki izključili internet. Ja, slišim.
Najbrž. Ok, misliš. Tukaj sprašuje Uroš Bukovec, ki sem ga sicer skozi njegove komentarje na mojem kanalu prepoznal kot rahlo levičarsko inkliniranega. In sprašuje, kaj pa misli gospod Štih, ali je policijska ura in zapiranje fašizem?
Odvisno od konteksta. Ne? V nekem zgodovinskem kontekstu, v katerem smo zdaj, ne, ko imamo epidemijo, ki bi radi omejili, ne,
Tomaž?
Je to pač nek ukrep, ne, ki je žali Bog nujen. Ne. Jaz upam, da bo čim krajši. Ne. Če bi bilo pa to recimo omejevanje politične konkurence oziroma ukrep, ki bi imel za cilj neko omejevanje ljudi izven domene proti epidemioloških ukrepov, ne, potem bi bil pa to definitivno fašizem. Ne. To je to. Se slišimo? Mogoče imamo zamik.
Ja, najbrž res, ampak recimo, da je tu bi lahko bil nek filozofski point, pa bi po moje bilo res izjemno pomembno, da ga razdelava, ker obstajajo libertarci ali klasični liberalci, ki bodo rekli, ja, ampak recimo zadeve, kot so epidemije ali pandemije ali vojne, so super okoliščine, v katerih vlade izkoristijo to, da ljudem odzamejo svoboščine, pa jih potem nikoli več ne vrnejo. Mislim, slišal sem že ljudi to govoriti, no? Ne vem kolikokrat in če sploh se je to dogajalo v zgodovini, ampak recimo, vzemimo, da se to redno dogajalo, da se je že dogajalo. Kako nas se ljudje, in recimo, da obstaja nek globalni komplot, ne? Komplot globalnih vlad, ki nam želijo odzeti svoboščine s pretvezo ali pa s pomočjo realnega, resničnega virusa. Ne? Kako naj normalni povprečni človek, ki ni involviran v te komplote, razmišlja, kako so naj postali proti temu?
Pragmatično. Ne? To se pravi, gotovo bo težek ta prehod politike nazaj na navadno stanje, ne? Ker kadarkoli se odločijo, da bojo to preklopili, ne? In ta preklop se mora zgoditi čim prej, ne? Je odvisen samo še od cepljenja, ne? Bodo tisti, ki jim bojo rekli, no sej, zdaj ste pa preklopili tako zgodaj, ne? Zato, ker ste nehali slediti svoji politiki, ne? In vedno bojo tisti, ki bojo pritiskali, naj prenehajo slediti politiki lockdownov, ne, in naj priznajo svojo napako. Ne. In seveda politika težko priznava napake, ne, in zato bo marsikatera vlada to storila zelo previdno, da ne bo s tem povzročila neke politične situacije, v kateri bi jo obtožili, da je bilo vse skupaj brez veze. Ne. Ampak vseeno bi pa rekel, da vse te obtožbe, ne, vlad v času epidemije so za lase privlečene. To so izjemne okoliščine, ne. In te izjemne okoliščine se bojo končale, in če bo potem, ko se končajo karkoli od tega ostalo, od teh izjemnih ukrepov, ki jih moja generacija ne pomni in jih najbrž tudi ne bo več nikoli v življenju. Ne. Ko se bo to končalo, ne, takrat se pa začnemo pogovarjati o tem, kaj je in kaj ni fašizem. Ne?
V zvezi s tem sem te želel še vprašati, misliš, da je opredeljevanje vlad v takih izjemnih okoliščinah ali ko obstajajo takšne eksternalije, jih je sploh smiselno opredeljevati, o njih razpravljati kot o desnih, levih, ali je, kot si na nek način že namignil v takih okoliščinah, morda najbolje preprosto pač molčati, čakati, da se te izredne okoliščine končajo in šele potem, če po teh izrednih okoliščinah te vlade ravnajo še enako, jih potem označiti za leve ali desne. Po drugi strani pa, kaj pa, če se te izredne okoliščine vse navidezno ali pa dolgotrajno nikoli ne končajo, ker zdaj resnici na ljubo se nekaj časa že vlečejo, ne? In ljudje postajajo vedno bolj nervozni in si verjetno postavljajo vprašanja, zdaj smo že leta pa pol, 2 leti smo v teh izrednih okoliščinah, kaj pa če lahko to gre v nedogled, lahko ta eksternalija, lahko tem okoliščinam damo status eksternalije v nedogled, ali bo na neki točki pač treba reči, zdaj pa gremo ful Švedska.
Ja, jaz mislim, da...
Če tega ne bo konc.
Mislim, da to ne more trajati. Mislim, da se bojo te izjemne okoliščine končale se bojo, ko bo stopnja cepljenja dovolj visoka, predvsem zato, ker to ekonomsko ni vzdržno, kar počnemo. Ne? To se pravi, država de facto prepoveduje vso delovno aktivnost večine državljanov in to ima strahotne posledice in tega si nobena država na dolgi rok ne more privoščiti, ker ti ne moreš plačevati ljudem pa davke nazaj dobivati. Ustvarjanje ni kroženje vode, pa da se vse vrne skozi krog, pa noben nič ne dela. Ne. Morajo ljudje začeti delati. Ne. Tako da mislim, da bojo določene zahodne države, recimo Britanija, dosti prej, ker imajo več te poslovne kulture in so bolj od tega odvisne. Nekatere malo bolj previdno, zaradi notranje političnih razmer, ampak vse se bojo pa vrnile in da se bo tudi levo in desno zelo hitro vrnilo v trenutku, ko bo treba gospodarstvo, ki smo ga zdaj 1 leto dušili, spodbuditi. Ne? In kateri bojo tisti ukrepi, ne? En države bojo šle na polni socializem, druge države bojo šle pa, tako kot naša vlada, na protibirokracijo in tam se bo pokazalo, kdo je kakšne barve. Bi pa še nekaj bilo zelo pomembno omeniti. Ne? Slovenska vlada ima desne stranke pa levo-sredinske stranke. Ne? Hočem reči koalicija. Ne? In vi morate za vsak ukrep v parlamentu dobiti 46 glasov in med temi glasovi so mogli biti, ne vem, rajči, sluge in tako dalje, ne? Drugače niste mogli sprejeti, tako da je zelo težko pričakovati od koalicije, ki ima notri stranke, ki na to ne pristanejo, da bo speljala določene ukrepe, za katere nima dovolj glasov. Ne? To je pa drug problem. Ne? Mi dejansko nimamo desne vlade, mi imamo sredinsko vlado.
Ja, mislim, danes smo videli, zjutraj sem imel posebno oddajo o tem, ker sem spremljal jutranje tvite oziroma tvite dneva nazaj. In zadeva je bila taka, vse moje stališče je takšno, kot da vsi verjamejo, da lahko premierju vlade, kadar je na tej poziciji Janez Janša, rečejo karkoli, le on se ne sme nikakor odzvati, ker če se odzove, je on tisti, ki je kriv za krizo v koaliciji, ki kot posledica nastane. Pa vem, da mi bodo rekli, ti si janšist, ti si pristranski, pa tudi tebe, Tomaž, bodo na tak ali drugačen način povezovali z Janezom Janšo, brez kakršnihkoli poglobljenih argumentov. Pa vendar, zdaj govorim kot iskren, resnicoljub človek, iskalec resnice, sem jaz nor, ali je zadeva res taka, da ga njegova koalicijska partnerka napade, potem se on odzove in interpretacija je vedno ista. Ne glede na to, kdo interpretira, to interpretirajo drugi koalicijski partnerji, kot so NSI, ali to interpretira Sluga in SMC, morda Desus. Interpretacije so vedno iste. Joj, pa Janša bi lahko bil malo bolj taktičen, malo bolj pragmatičen. Ja, ampak kdaj se ta taktika, kdaj se ta pragmatičnost Janeza Janše konča, kdaj on pa lahko, kdaj pa sme spregovoriti. Se tebi tudi zdi, da je ta nek narativ, ki preveva naše medije v povezavi z Janezom Janšo, da je nekoliko absurden.
Predvsem je načrten, ne? To se pravi, ta interpretacija, ki je vedno ista z razlogom. Ne? Da se to
glede njegovih pristojnosti pa svoboščin.
Da se to usede v podzavest ljudi. Ne? To je propagandna interpretacija in se vedno tudi spodbuja za to, da bi se usedla. Veš, propaganda deluje na način, ne? Da si izberejo nekaj sporočil, ne? In ta sporočila nenehno ponavljajo. Ne? In eno izmed sporočil je to, drugo sporočilo je komunikacija, ne? Tretje sporočilo je denimo svoboda medijev, ne? In tako dalje. In ta sporočila nenehno ponavlja. Ne? In to je zgodba, zakaj se to dela in poslanke, kakršna je Janja Sluga, tudi načrtno provocirajo, ali pa Ljudmila Novak načrtno provocirajo, zato da dobijo odziv, zato da lahko utrjujejo to propagando. Ne. To je čisto načrtno, to je politični aktivizem, propagandni aktivizem. Ne. Težava, v kateri se nahaja levica, je pa seveda, desnica, je pa seveda to, da so levičari neprimerno medijsko močnejši, ne, in da oni lahko iz eno reakcijo naredijo desnici mnogo več škode, kot jo desnica lahko naredi levici. Ne. Recimo, če se vrnemo na tisto temo, ki smo začela danes, ne, o tisti šali, ne, tako imenovani fašist šali, ne, že Swiss fašist, ne, lej, mediji imajo to moč, ne, da tako šalo vzamejo iz konteksta. Ne. In s tem zasedajo 90% vsega medijskega prostora v Sloveniji. To levica lahko naredi. Ne. In potem ne dovolijo objaviti, da si se ti delal norca iz njihove antifašistične histerije, ne, oziroma iz tega, da 76 let po vojni še vedno halucinirajo domobrance in SS-ovce za vsakim vogalom. Ne. Tega ne dovolijo objaviti. Ne. Oni namerno lažejo. Ne. Po vrhu pa ta posnetek, ne, izrežejo, ne, in pošljejo vsem svojim evropskim in še drugim mednarodnim tovarišem kot dokaz, kako je Slovenija res fašistična. Ne? In da so mediji, ki temu ugovarjajo tej tezi, tudi fašistični. Evo dokaze, imamo fašistični mediji, izrežejo del posnetka, del šale. Ne? In recimo na desni, ne, oziroma tisti, ki vodijo državo v tem trenutku.
In tudi verjetno bodo poslali. Ne?
Tako. In tisti, ki vodijo državo v tem trenutku, si tega ne morejo privoščiti. Ne? Oziroma, to je zanje nepotreben rovovski boj, ne? V katerem se lahko zelo umažejo in zelo težko zmagajo. Ne? Zelo lahko se lahko umažejo. Ne? Od tukaj imaš tudi ti recimo določen del javnosti, ki se distancira, ne? Ker če se tega ne naredi, ne? In bodo socialistični medijski aktivisti iztrgali izjavo iz konteksta, prišli do njih in jo poskušali nalepiti na čelo. Ne? Recimo, to je način, zakaj je desnica večinoma tiho, oziroma se večinoma v takšnih primerih brani, ne? Namesto, da bi stala na svoji poziciji. Ne? Jaz bi pa nekako zdravil to na drug način, ta antifašizem. Ne? In sicer ne bi ga zdravil z oprečevanjem, ne bi ga zjavil z nasprotno norostjo, ne, recimo zadnje čase je popularno znašanje nad nami nič krivimi Židi, ne, ampak bi ga zdravil predvsem na način, kot ga zdaj zdrava, s humorjem in z debato. To je to. Ne. debato, ki premika to Overtonovo področje na desno, ne, in pa z osredotočenjem stvari, ki so res pomembne za družbo, ne, kar antifašizem ni tisti neka zadnja briga par radikalnih aktivistov, ki jo nenehno forsirajo v medije. Ne. In če kakšne pozicije v nekem trenutku ni mogoče braniti, ne, je vlada ne bo branila in to je treba razumeti, ne, ampak se bo potuhnila in jo rehabilitirala v naslednjem trenutku. Ne. To se tako naredi. Ne. Đorđe Balašević bi recimo tem današnjim progresivnim socialistom rekel s tistimi njegovimi verzijami, lude i psihopate, što bi rušili, pa onda nama da nude lopate. Ne. In ti veš, da za sobivanje z norci je potrebno imeti potrpljenje. Ne. In v tem smislu so tri reakcije napačne. Ne. Prva reakcija je oprečevanje. Ne. Če se opravičiš, s tem priznaš, da si nekaj storil narobe. Ne. In to, jaz sem se naučil iz lastnih izkušenj, da je to odgovarjanje in to pojasnjevanje socialistični inkviziciji, ne, največkrat podobno odgovarjanju na tisto vprašanje, ali ti še vedno pretepaš svojo ženo. Ne. Zdaj, kaj češ reči? Ne? Če rečeš ne, pomeni, da si jo pretepal. Ne. Če rečeš ja, ne, jo še vedno pretepaš. Ne. To je ta inkvizicija in nima se smisla njim karkoli upravičevati za karkoli. Nasprotna norost, ne, če bi hotel na to odgovoriti z dejanskim radikalizmom, ki bi zrcalil njihovega, ne, potem jih to samo počge, ne, ker v teh svojih norih teorijah zarote, ne, o tem, kako bosta Mussolini in Hitler prilezla iz groba, ne, začnejo videti resnico, ne, in potem se histerično bojijo, da bosta potem ukinila sredstva za NVO-je, pa pustila zasebnim šolam tekmovati z državnimi, ne, pustila ljudem graditi hiše v lastni režiji in počela druge fašistične grozote. Ne, a veš, ne. Zadnje, pa ne najmanj pomembno je pa, da emocionalne reakcije, pretresenost na tako kampanjo, cancel kampanjo proti tebi, pa v bistvu diskreditira tistega, ki tako reagira bolj kot tiste, ki to počnejo. Ne. Zato, to je recimo razlog, zakaj jaz, ko twitam, ne, dostikrat twitam ohrani, ne, ker s tem zbezam na plano prostake, ne, ki se skrivajo na videz zmernih levičarjev, ne, in s tem njihovim kolegom pokažem, s kom so oni to v istem taboru. Ne. Veš, malo je tukaj provokacije. Ne. In če oni pokažejo tako emocionalno reakcijo, ne, je pogovor konec. Ne. Tako da jaz mislim, da edini način, kako se zdravi antifašizem, je to, kar sem na začetku rekel, ne. Humor, odprta debata, detabuizacija, pa osredotočenje na stvari, ki so dejansko pomembne. S tem se neutralizira te nore bojevnike. To je to.
Ja, povem svoj mnenje o tem. Meni se zdi, da je ta javni diskurs, kakor je zdaj nagnjen, na katerega pristajajo tudi nekateri desničarji, da je kot bi nagovarjal nekega dobrega prijatelja, zmernega levičarja, ki posluša tole. Ne? Zdi se, kot da vsi govorimo nekemu svojemu namišljenemu dobremu prijatelju, zmernemu levičarju, za katerega upamo, da bo prestopil na našo stran, če bomo mu le dokazali, da smo manj fašistični od njegovih kolegov, nekoliko skrajnejših levičarjev. Pa nekaj bi dobro, misliš, da takle hipotetični namišljeni prijatelj sploh v realnosti obstaja, ali ne obstaja in je v bistvu popolnoma nesmiselno, da bi katerikoli desničar še kadarkoli, sploh v času, ko razumem, da imajo oni monopol v medijih, ampak nam kljub temu obstaja Nova 24 TV, ne? Pa zdaj mi, pa demokracija, pa nekaj se kljub vsemu rojeva, nekaj brbota, je nekaj na trgu, kar je prepoznavno in ljudje, desničari, vedo, kam lahko grejo po informacije, o tem, če levičari lažejo ali ne, naprimer. Ne? Tudi tako imenovani sredinci ali neodločenci vedo, kam lahko grejo brati. Ne? se ima smisla še podrejati tej inkviziciji ali je pa treba na neki točki preprosto reči, alo, ni moralnega piedestala, za tebe ni.
Jaz mislim, da je...
Na isti ploščadi smo. Ja, se vračam.
Se mi zdi, da je vprašanje, kdo to stori. Kot sem prej rekel, naša vlada, ki bo lihkar prevzela vodenje EU, tega ne more storiti, ker bo imela nenehno polena pod noge med to vlogo. In si enostavno tega ne more privoščiti, oziroma je to predraga bitka, da bi jo odpiral zdaj. Mi si pa to lahko privoščimo. Jaz recimo nimam odgovornosti vodenja države in mene ves ta cirkus kvečemo zabava. Tako da jaz se ne rabim sklepati kompromisov z totalitarci. Razumem, kako to je, zaradi tega, ker ko sem bil recimo v kabinetu ministra, tudi jaz mogel igrati to vlogo in recimo nisem mogel govoriti, kar bi želel, da s tem ne bi škodoval ministru, niti pojasnjevati ljudi stvari, ki so nas bolele, ker mogoče taktično ni bil pravi trenutek za komuniciranje tega in smo imeli drugačen dogovor, kako se bo to skomuniciralo. In to je politika, in tega ne gre obsojati, ali se pa jeziti na to, ker tako je bilo od nekdaj. Namesto tega bi raj vsi tisti, ki si to lahko privoščimo, vzpostavljali pogoje, v katerih se humorja ne bo več preganjalo, v katerih ne bo več nekih tabu tem. Ne nazadnje se je Monty Python iz fašizma norčeval pred pol stoletja, to je tema, ki je ravno tako primerna za humor kot vse druge. Je pa to naloga nas, ni to naloga vlade. Tukaj bi na še eno stvar upozoril, en pojav, ki se dogaja v tej komunikaciji, ki je pogosto spregledan in še ni bil omenjen. Med nami pa med levico gre v bistvu za dve vrsti nerazumevanja. Najprej se ne razume očitno, in sicer se ne razume zato, ker socialisti nimajo smisla za humor, to je očitno. In ne želijo imeti smisla za humor, ko jim to koristne, tudi če vejo, da je šala, je slavna revolucija pomembnejša od tega, a veš. In moti jih tudi to, da humor ljudi osvobaja, in da osvobojeni ljudje ne potrebujejo ne pastirja, ne duhovnika, ne politkomisarja. Hello.
Hello, Stefan. Do you see us? Do you hear us?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Hang on a sec here.
No.
Let me just get myself sorted out in case. Audio. There we go.
Ja, dragi gledalci, dragi gledalke.
All right.
Pridružil se nam bo tudi Stefan Molinju.
Switch to English, shall we?
Do you hear us now?
Yes, the fault was at my end. Sorry about that. How are you guys doing? Nice to meet you, Tomaž.
Yeah.
Hello, nice to meet you, Stefan.
I told you about Tomaž. Tomaž is probably the most famous Slovene libertarian. He practically owns this nickname on Slovene Twitter. That means in English libertarian.
Yeah, very nice. Nice to meet you.
Doesn't it, Tomaž? What does Libertarec mean? It's libertarian in English, yes. Isn't it?
It's a libertarian. It's a mix. Depends, but a mix between libertarian and classical.
As I told you, as I explained to you, Stefan,
Sorry, you just cut out there. You said you were explaining to me something. Oh, did I lose audio again? Hang on a sec.
As I explained to you, all.
Oh.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
I think we have some technical difficulties.
All right, hang on a sec here.
Yeah, can we hear each other?
I can hear you. Can you hear me all right? Testing 1, 2, 3. I can hear you. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I can hear you. You can't hear me. All right.
Yeah, I can hear you.
You can hear me. All right.
Tomaž?
Good.
Do we have a delay?
Okay. Good. I explained to you that all hell got loose after our interview on a couple of days ago. I lost my job. The 80% of Slovenia thinks I'm a fascist, and 80% of Slovenia also thinks that I had an interview with a fascist.
Oh, so
Stefan
even
Molyneux,
though
a
we
fascist?
distinctly
Sir?
argued against fascism and rejected fascism, and I had a whole speech about how corporations being used by the left to achieve their political agenda is the very definition of fascism, and I opposed all of that. Nonetheless, they're just sticking the F label on us for no objective reason. Was there anything in the interview that they picked out and said, aha, here's the proof? Was there anything that you said or I said that could be misinterpreted that we could clarify, or what happened there? I'm not sure if we have a delay or...
Well, no, I always thought that the public space would be something where you would presuppose that you have to have arguments and that you have to have evidence for your presuppositions or for your judgments and so forth. But it seems that in this public space in Slovenia, and not only in Slovenian public space, because you had your own experience in the global arena similar to mine, you don't have to use any evidence anymore. You don't have to have any arguments anymore. Pure emotional judgments are enough. If you yell enough that your opponent is a fascist, then you win.
Well, and it's a telling sign of...
And you can kill him.
Yeah. Well, it's a telling sign of just who won the Second World War, that to be called a fascist is a great insult, even though I can't think of a single, even remotely close to fascist Western government in the world. But if you call someone a communist, that's not an insult enough to get them deplatformed, even though there are still totalitarian communist regimes in the world, even though there are very pro-communist professors by the thousands in Western universities, even though communism has a death count far higher than fascism. Just calling someone a fascist, which is mostly a dead political ideology, is, fascists aren't in charge of China. Fascists aren't in charge of Cuba. Fascists didn't take control in Venezuela. These were all leftists, socialists, and so on. And so calling someone a socialist or a communist, which has a death count of 100 million people plus just in the 20th century, well, that's not an insult. In fact, that can sometimes be a compliment and a path to getting tenureship as a professor. But calling someone a fascist, it's like calling someone a Nazi, which is a dead ideology that was killed at the end of the 20th century, or end of the Second World War with the Nuremberg trials and so on. So there aren't any Nazis in control of anything, and yet, billions of people are still laboring under socialism and communism. North Korea was founded as a communist state. China, of course. You look at the difference between mainland China and Hong Kong, you can see the difference between a free society in Hong Kong and a communist dictatorship in China. So, I just say to hell with them. If they're that stupid and that malevolent and that blind and that programmed, it's kind of hard to save satanic sheep, if that makes any sense. It's kind of hard to, we're kind of trying to keep the wolves of communism and socialism away from the throats of the general population. And if the general population sides with the wolves, part of me is just like, okay, I guess they're going to have to learn through experience, because they're not going to learn through reason. They're going to attack the very people who are trying to defend them from communism and socialism, and they're going to use labels like fascist that were delivered to them by the communists and the socialists to take out those who stand between the communists and the power that they lust for. And after a while, if the sheep keep attacking you with the weapons handed to them by the communists, it's like, okay, well, then I guess we're going to have to just let the communists have their way, and people are just going to have to learn through bitter experience, because being called a fascist when, if you're interested in libertarianism, the non-aggression principle, a small or no government, that's the very opposite of fascism. Fascism as a muscular, race-based, nationalistic government program that is centered around the link between corporate power and state power. And I oppose corporations, I oppose the state, I oppose communism. I would oppose fascism if I thought fascism was a dangerous thing in the world. I absolutely, if fascism was like the big thing that was facing the world, if Nazism was the big thing facing the world in 2021, I'd be all over that stuff. But it's not. It's just plain not. The big danger is creeping socialism and communism. International socialism, not national socialism, is the big danger at the moment. So that's what we focus on. And if people think that fascism has any political power, well, that if you want to know who rules over you, look at who you can't criticize, right? And calling us a fascist, if the fascists were really big and powerful and dangerous and in charge of big major social institutions and armies and police and internal investigation agencies, if fascists were really that powerful and that dangerous, well, then you wouldn't call anyone a fascist, because you'd be scared, right? So the very insult that's used is the insult that shows how politically powerless the word is. So I think it's a real shame, and I'm sorry you got caught up in it. It's a real tragedy. And if people keep attacking the intellectuals who are trying to defend them, they're going to go very badly. It's going to go very badly for those people. And I hope and I pray that they will stop these ridiculous attacks and at least let us try and do our job. But you can only punch the surgeon for so long before he's like, you know what, you go heal yourself.
No, Tomaž?
It's interesting. One of the most interesting facts is that, well, first we need to understand why sometimes the left sees us as fascists or as fascist apologists. And there's one interesting theory that says that the socialists see socialists as good. And we see it as quite totalitarian, quite restrictive, attacking private property, attacking basic human rights, attacking political rights. And we sometimes use a comparison and we say, well, listen, fascism was initially a progressive movement. Benito Mussolini came from Italian socialist tradition. His father was a socialist. He was a socialist. He was an editor of a socialist newspaper, Avanti, which was one of the main socialist newspapers in Italy. And when you see his manifest that he wrote in 1919, you see there pretty much socialist influences. You see some populist influences, such as voting rights for women. You see proportional representation. You see a reduction of voting age to 18 years. But you also see social partnerships, which are the essence of European social democracy. You see the minimum wage. You see workers co-running the factories. So you see essentially a socialist program. So libertarians often say, well, socialism, fascism are really brothers. And the problem here is that when we say this, we mean they are as bad as socialists. The fascists are as bad as socialists. fascism is essentially just a social corporativism. But when a socialist hears this, he thinks, okay, my socialism is good. And this guy is saying that fascism equals to socialism. That means he's apologizing fascism. Because he thinks, okay, if it's equal to socialism, then it's good. So that's one misunderstanding that we have with this label. And it's true, as Stefan said, fascism today has a contemporary fascism is more or less an industry. Anti-fascism, contemporary anti-fascism is more or less an industry. So it's a way to earn money. It's a way to get public exposure. It's a way to be popular. It's a way to do educations inside corporations, etc., etc. And because fascists are marginalized, and they are not a force from 1943, since the capitulation of Italy. What is happening is they need to invent new and new fascists to excuse their existence, to excuse the funds that they are receiving. And that's why there are so many different, I would say, fractions of fascists, from people who oppose unifying the toilets for men and women, which are a fraction of fascists, or so they are called, to people that that think that the taxes are too high, and again they are Marx fascists. And so what we have here is we have a I would say invented fascisms, a lot of them, that have nothing to do with historical fascism. And at the end we come to the conclusion that fascism is simply everything that socialists don't like. That's what they call it. And the reason why everyone complained about the last show is because you made Alesh, you made a mistake by telling a joke.
There's no jokes in the modern world, sadly.
Yeah. Your joke was, "Oh, welcome to our fascist media," and they cut this and they send it to all possible addresses, to the European Union, to your job, to everywhere, saying, "Look at this guy. This guy is a fascist media." So
I thought what you meant was it was a response to the fascist media in your country, not that you were making a joke about this. Yeah, but you can't make jokes, sadly, I mean, about any of this stuff, because you just get, sliced and diced. I mean, all the criticisms of me are all just based upon completely sliced and diced snippets that are completely taken out of context, and like saying that the Bible is an atheist document because it says the fool in his heart has said there is no God, and you say, the Bible says there is no God, right? So unfortunately you have to kind of have a rolling ticker tape, like a chiron, underneath everything you say, and say, okay, how could this be sliced up to make me look as bad as humanly possible? And it's a real shame. And even though within the show we specifically rejected fascism. Fascism is masculine socialism, whereas what we call socialism now tends to be more feminine socialism, which is like free stuff. But you look at even the National Socialist German Workers' Party, Hitler's party in the 1920s and the 1930s, and their 25 points, a straight-up socialist manifesto: free healthcare, free education, so big public works programs, massive redistribution of income, higher taxes. It's all the same stuff. It's collectivism, the initiation of force, and whatever moral sanctimonious lies they have to tell you to support them taking out the sword and pointing it at people to get their resources. They don't care what it is. Fascism was in favor at one point, and largely as a result of communism. And then fascism is out of favor, communism is in favor, but it's the same crap, just a different pile. So yeah, unfortunately, you do have to. I mean, I constantly, whenever I'm speaking, I'm always thinking, okay, well, I've got what I'm saying, and then I've got the other part of my brain, which is a shame. It's just natural. It's sad you have to be this way, but what I'm saying plus how can this be sliced and diced? Because if you say something, even if you say something and then you correct yourself and you say, oh, let me rephrase that, they'll just take the part before you correct yourself. And the level of almost paranoia that you have to have when you're speaking in public, it's a hard lesson to learn for sure. And it's a real shame. But the shame is the fools who swallow this nonsense, not the people who purvey it. It's kind of like the question between the drug dealer and the drug user. Who's more to blame? Well, it's hard to say. It's a relationship. If people gave up drugs, there wouldn't be any drug dealers. If there weren't any drug dealers, people would probably still be growing their own drugs or getting them in some other way. So I generally view it as a consumption issue, that the problem is that we have hundreds of millions of people in the West that have been raised with pure propaganda. They've not been taught how to think for themselves, and they've had emotional hot buttons put in them so that these hot buttons can be hammered, so that the mob can be roused. All they have to say is, this guy's a Shrek, this guy's an ogre, this guy's a bad guy. And then the mindless mob just gets ginned up with their own empty frustration, bitter non-lives, especially these days under the pandemic when people have sacrificed a year of their lives on the altar of some highly dubious science. And all that happens is they'll just paint you with this target, they'll paint you with this label, and then the mob, with its baying, empty-headed zombie skulls, will just shriek until they get what they want. And there's this whole appeasement thing that's going on, where it's like, oh, people are upset, well, we got to appease them, as opposed to, if you think he's a bad guy, there's lots of people on the internet and on TV. You can go out and feed the birds, you can go out and have a swim, you can go out and paint a fence. There's lots of things that you could do if you find someone upsetting or offensive, rather than fight to get them erased from human consciousness. But that is where we are. And what we do with this big lump of people who can't think, and many of them won't think even if you give them the opportunity. Right now, they're weaponized, right? They're weaponized through language to attack people who oppose the path to socialism, and it's a sad thing. It's a sad thing, and I'm kind of half and half, because part of me is like, stay in and fight, and the other thing is like, for what? For the people who will. If a bad word is attached to you by some crazy person, they'll be just like, oh yeah, he's a bad guy, let's destroy his life. It's like, so why would I be fighting to save this particular reality? It's a tough question, right? So yeah, I'm sorry, but yeah, got to have this continual, can this be reassembled? I mean, now there's even deep fake videos, right? So it can get even more crazy. That you don't even have to say anything bad, and people can make stuff. There's a video somebody sent me of me singing Thriller by Michael Jackson. Because people can just better than I ever would, but they can just take a photo and they can animate it. They can take your voice, they can deep fake it. You've seen the Tom Cruise ones; they've done ones for Jordan Peterson too. So now it's almost like to the point where you don't even need to care about this. But the other thing too, of course, everybody would know it's a joke, because nobody would have a show with me on it in particular and say, square jaw, round German bullet head, blue eyes, and say, aha, the fascist media, right? You don't want to do that, because that's too easy to misinterpret. But yeah, so I'm sorry. I'm really sorry that it came to that. But on the other hand, I found that deplatforming can be very, very liberating in many ways, because you can go into alternative pathways to gain an audience, to gain revenue. And it can be a real opportunity in disguise, although it's not an easy passage.
There's this gotcha question for you, Stefan. You'll be very fond of. Sebastian Pechnik is asking, is Stefan still a libertarian after the free market decided he should be banned? Now I know what your answer will be, that it wasn't the free market that decided you should be banned. But I wanted to ask you guys another question. Do you remember couple of years ago, maybe a decade, when left was worried about multinational corporations? They were worried the multinational corporations were becoming stronger than the states. Do you remember this?
Oh yeah, no, they used to hate corporations until they wormed their way in and just say, hey, now this power, But that's the Boromir thing, Let's destroy the ring. Ooh, now that I have it, maybe I should keep it, right? I mean, that's the way things go. And just to clarify, the free market had absolutely nothing to do with my deplatforming. Just to really clarify things to people, why did I get deplatformed? Because I had an influence on the 2016 election. My videos about Trump were seen millions and millions and millions of times, as well as the podcasts and this and that and the other. And Trump only won by 70,000 votes. They knew it was going to be close. And so everybody who had any kind of influence on the 2016 election was not allowed to be around for 2020. There's nothing to do with the free market. It's because when you gain control of the state, you gain control of a giant army, a giant navy, a giant weapons program. You gain control of the money printing presses. You gain control of trillions and trillions of dollars and the greatest power in the world, which is the American government, at least for now. So that's a lot of power. And now none of that would exist in the free market. Also, of course, people felt that I was doing terrible things I had 17 world-renowned experts coming on my show, scientists and statisticians and so on, and they talked about ethnic differences in IQ and other differences. And I brought this on because I want us all to be able to get along, and we can never get along without facts. As long as facts are denied, we can fight. But we all meet together and we can discuss things rationally when we have facts. And there are differences in ethnic outcomes all across the world. And I wanted to provide an explanation other than endless white racism and hatred, because that's obviously very dangerous for white people, as we can sort of see playing out in America at the moment. So I wanted the world to be able to meet in facts and deal with things in a rational manner. And that, of course, goes very much against the communist agenda, which has been talked about since the early 1920s, which is to bring the races together, gin up hatred against whites in particular, and use that to take down Western capitalist countries. So there was that as well, and the ethnic minorities will tend to vote for the left, and so the left will work very hard to protect them in the way that the right doesn't work to protect people who support it. So yeah, I mean, I was simply in the way of the path to power. In a libertarian or a free market society, a stateless society, there is no path to power. So there's no reason to deplatform people, because there isn't an election that gives you control of trillions of dollars in the largest military the world has ever seen. So without that particular goal, without that gold at the end of the rainbow, there's no need to get people out of the way. So no, the free market didn't have anything to do with it. And it's a funny thing too, like it's kind of an insult. I don't take it personally, right? Because, you got to have a pretty thick skin to be in the public square. But it's kind of an insult where people say, even if it was true, let's say the free market had deplatformed me and it was just the free market for whatever reason, right? Oh, plus, of course, everyone's educated by government schools, government universities, so the fact that they can't think and get emotionally programmed to react against facts, well, that's not the free market. The people's education and state of mind has almost nothing to do with the free market. But let's say it did. Let's say it was 100% free market and I got deplatformed. And then people said, wait, are you still a free market guy even though the free market deplatformed you? And I don't know what people's relationship is to integrity, my friends, but let me tell you something. What is true is not dependent upon my personal outcome. It's just not. What is factual, what is moral, what is good, what is virtuous, is not contingent upon how it plays out for me. That's just not. It's like saying to a guy, the first guy to come up with a theory of radiation, right? A theory of radiation. And he gets a sunburn, right? And then someone says, oh, well, now you have a sunburn, man. Are you going to abandon your theory of radiation because it had a negative consequence for you? And it's like, the theory of radiation is true or false, regardless of who gets a sunburn or who doesn't, right? Any individual, right? So property rights, the non-aggression principle, do not initiate force against others, respect the personal property called the body, respect the property of people. Even if that played out to have some negative effect on me, what on earth would that have to do with the virtues and values of those particular? I mean, look, if you want to say we should abandon the non-aggression principle and we should use force to get what we want, which is the essence of the state, then imagine what are you going to teach your kids? What are you going to teach your kids? What are you going to do in a kindergarten? Are you going to sit there? And I worked in a daycare as a teenager for many years. And what do I say to the kids, right? Respect property, don't hit. Don't push. Wait your turn. Stand in line. Just be a reasonable human being and take your turn and all that. So all we do is we say to kids, and this is the whole process of turning them from, feral narcissistic babies to decent young people, is we say, don't hit, don't steal, don't lie, don't use force to get what you want. Respect people's property and respect their person. And then that's all we do with kids. And then when we come to adults, we then say, oh, well, now you have to vote for who's going to steal the most on your behalf from people who aren't even born yet through national debts, right? So if you're not willing to teach your children to use force to get what they want, to violate persons and property in order to get what they want, do you send your kids to school saying, you don't need a lunch? There are kids in this school, their parents make more than you. You just take their damn lunch. Just steal their lunch because their parents make more, and this is just redistribution. And if they don't want you to steal their lunch, you lock them in a cupboard. You lock them in a basement until such time as they want to give up their lunch. Now, if you were a parent and you sent your kid to kindergarten or to school with that philosophy, which is socialism, right? Oh, well, if the parents make more, you can tell from the car that comes up, and I'll do the research. I'll find out what the parents make. So I don't need to send you to school with any lunch because, just take it from the richer kids. Or if you say, oh, we don't need any health insurance, and we don't even need to take care of our health because anytime we need health care, we'll just go in with a gun to a doctor's office, we'll put the gun to his head and force him to give us health care. Now, if you tried that, can you imagine the teacher, like some kid is like roundhousing some other kid and taking their lunch, and the teacher says, well, what are you doing? That's insane. You can't use force to get what you want. And then the kid says, well, you have a teachers union, don't you? Right? I mean, you use force. Like my parents have to pay their property taxes or we get kicked out of our house and our house gets stolen so that you can take 2.5 months off in the summer and have a professional development, sit around with your thumb up your ass day a couple of times a month. So why can't I use to get force what I want? You as a teacher in this entire damn school system, you all use force to get what you want. But what's wrong with me doing? Well, if you do it as a kid, that's really bad. But if I do it as an adult, that's morality, baby. That's the price you pay to live in a civilized society called taxation, right? So, I don't know. The idea that I would turn on the free market because even if it had been the case that the free market had deplatformed me, I don't know what people's, like, are you jellyfish? Do you have no spine, no integrity? Even if the free market had completely deplatformed me, it would have absolutely no bearing on the morals of respecting property and respecting people. It has a negative effect on me has no basis. And it's so lazy. It's like the people who say, well, Ayn Rand was a hypocrite because she took Social Security when she got old and therefore her entire philosophy, blah, blah, blah. It's ridiculous. She said very clearly, hey, they took it from me, I'm taking it back. That's totally fine. And even if she was a hypocrite, it doesn't mean that her arguments were completely false. Otherwise, we could just find any shred of hypocrisy, which all human beings have displayed at one time or another, and any shred of hypocrisy, or in your case, Alesh, a shred of humor, and we would just then be able to dismiss anybody. But hey, if you can't dismiss communism because of 100 million dead, you can't dismiss any idea for mere peaceful hypocrisy. So anyway, I hope that makes some sense. But yeah, it's one of these strange statements like, well, it had a negative effect on you. Does that mean you don't believe it anymore? It's like, do you not know what intellectual integrity is? It means respecting the arguments regardless of the consequences. All right, got another couple of minutes for you guys. And any other questions or comments or issues I can help you with before I return you to your regularly scheduled show?
Yeah, perhaps for you both guys, just to clear these questions up about Twitter and Facebook and so forth. Are these private companies, de jure, de facto, in which sense is Twitter, for example, or YouTube or Facebook to be given the status of a private company when we talk about Twitter banning Stefan Molyneux, for example? Because people are saying that a private company did this, and they have the right to do this in your own philosophy. That this is how people think. But So,
But they're
gentlemen,
not.
what is your opinion?
They're not. But they're not
on
private
this,
companies. They're not even close to
subject?
private companies.
Is
Yeah, they're not.
Twitter-
Hang on. So they're not even close to private companies. So, first of all, they're using technology developed by the public sector, right? As you know, the internet was developed by government, right? Which is one of the reasons why it's kind of crappy. Why, like 80% of email traffic is spam, and why there's denial of service attacks all over the place. Why there's so much malware, and I mean, it's a sewage as a whole. We just hopefully the gold that floats down the sewage or something, not the gold floats. Wrong analogy, but you get what I mean. So they came out of the public sector of these companies. They have a special charter called being a corporation, which means that the leaders of those companies are immune from personal loss for corporate malfeasance. They make the decisions. They make the decisions for the corporation. And if those decisions are immoral or illegal or fraudulent, they themselves will never lose their house. They will never lose their cars. They will never lose their savings. And they will almost never be prosecuted, certainly in America. In Iceland, they threw a bunch of bankers in jail after the 07-08 financial crash. It happened to not one single banker or financial manager in America after the 07-08 crash, where there was immense amounts of fraud and manipulation of the market. So they come off the public sector. They have a special fascist shield called incorporation, which is a legal shield. And this means that the people who are in power, see, the people who have political power are always in competition with the people who have economic power. Because economic power and political power oppose each other. Because when you have more and more economic power, in general, that comes out of a free market. You kind of want the free market. Now, you'll want to use the state to keep your corporate power and so on, but there's always some paradigm shift that comes along and overturns things. This is always the case, right? The Twitter and Facebook, they're all going to be replaced over time by decentralized Bitcoin Lightning networks. I'm kind of working on one at the moment. So yeah, I mean, this is just how it's going to play out. But economic power thrives in a free market. Political power thrives by crushing the free market. So these two are always in tension. So what happened was the government captured the wealthy class by giving them special privileges called incorporation, which meant that they could never lose their personal money for any corporate malfeasance that they were in charge of and decided and did. It's kind of like having a hand puppet that if you commit a crime, the hand puppet goes to jail and they just hand you another one. I mean, that's a pretty good deal, right? I have an invisible friend. So if I go and punch a guy, my invisible friend Bob will go to court. And nothing will ever happen to me, and maybe some invisible friend supporter people will pay his bills. So it's a bulletproof get out of jail free card called incorporation, which would never exist in the free market. In the free market, I want to do business with a bank that if the bank loses money, the leadership of the bank lose their house. That's what I want out of a bank. I would never in a million years want to do business with a bank where they screw things up. They get to keep all the profits, and I get to lose all the money. And they get to walk away scot-free with some golden parachute for 10 million. Like, there's no way in a million years anybody would want to do anything like that. So the legal shield called incorporation has nothing to do with the free market. And the other aspect, of course, with social media companies is that they also have a second layer of bulletproof legal immunity called Section 230, the Communications Act, right? So Section 230, as I'm sure you're aware, and Poland has been dealing with this, and other countries are trying to find some way to deal with this. So if you are a newspaper or a magazine or a television station, and you publish something on your platform that is defamatory or libelous or fraudulent or illegal or whatever it is, well, then you get sued, and you could lose a lot of money. You could conceivably go to jail or something if you can pierce the corporate shield in that way. And this applies to every single media outlet in America except for basically the big tech platforms. Now, it applies to all platforms, but the big tech ones have the lawyers that keep all of this stuff going. And as you know, the reasons why the Republicans in America never dealt with big tech censorship was they're all funded by Google and Twitter and Facebook. I mean, they all get their checks, and the big corporations, they write the regulations. I mean, it's called regulatory capture. I'm sure everyone is aware of this. Like if you try and regulate the pharmaceutical industry, you hire people from the pharmaceutical industry who write the regulations to benefit the pharmaceutical industry at the expense of everyone else. So that's just the way governments and corporations work, which is why we're also anti-fascist, I assume. So what happens is you're supposed to get this immunity from content. So if somebody posts something illegal, or false or fraudulent, or not false, fraudulent, defamatory, or libelous or whatever, illegal, then the corporations are immune from any negative repercussions. You can't sue, they can't be sued, you can't sue them for anything like that. Now, they got that because they said, hey man, we're totally neutral. We don't have our thumb on the scale. The reason why you can sue a newspaper for publishing false things about you, defamatory things about you, is because the newspaper is curating the content, right? They say yes or no to the content that's on there. So the big tech corporations gained this legal immunity for the content that's posted on them in return for they have to be totally neutral. Now, come on. Does anyone in their wildest nightmares imagine that tech companies infested by leftists and Democrats, where the vast majority of their employees give to the Democrat Party and almost none of them have anything positive to say about Trump, and Project Veritas has revealed this repeatedly, these companies are relentlessly leftist. They are enforcement arms of censorship for the Democrat Party in the United States as a whole. And that would, of course, in any rational society, the moment that you start tinkering with search results, the moment that you start banning people for ideological reasons, the moment that you have your thumb on the scale, then one of two things have to happen. Number one, you are now liable for the content because you're blocking some people, which means if you say to some people, your content is not allowed on our platform, and you do that for ideological reasons, then you must be approving of everyone else. So therefore, you now have responsibility for what everyone else posts. If you're truly neutral, in other words, all legal speech is allowed, which is the only sane approach and what Poland and is enforcing, what other places like Locals and ThinkSpot are also enforcing. All legal speech is allowed. No, that's truly neutral. In other words, the only way you'd get something taken down is if a court of law found that the speech was illegal or defamatory or promoted violence and or hate speech or whatever it is. But you have to go through a whole legal process. Now, I mean, they've got things going on now. I think it's in Europe where Facebook is going to be like, they've got 24 hours to take something down. You can't go through a court process. You can't go through a review process. It's just going to be used to destroy political ideologies that are oppositional to the left, right? So they have the legal shield of corporatism. They have the legal shield of they can't be sued for content, despite the fact that it seems to me at least completely, totally, and blatantly obvious that they are interfering to benefit the left as a whole. And you can just see the patterns of deplatforming. So you can see that the election in America was largely thrown by Twitter, who took a Washington Post story off. It wouldn't allow it to be posted, wouldn't allow it to be shared, locked them out of their account shortly before the election about the unbelievably satanic contents of Hunter Biden's laptop. And that would have been enough to change the election outcome. So boom, of course they are massively interfering in my view. And if they could be sued for that, then you'd get into discovery and you'd look at all of the internal memos, all the internal documents, you'd have an examination of the code, and you would just see how all of these decisions were made. But of course they can't be sued. So they have a double layer of immunity from consequences, which gives them a huge amount of power and no accountability whatsoever. And there are a number of conservatives who've tried taking places like Twitter to court for deplatforming and so on, and it's no particular chance, although James O'Keefe is having more luck with the New York Times for falsehoods that I believe they said about him. So that's, again, nothing to do with the free market. They're propaganda arms, heavily shielded from any legal or moral consequences. They are propaganda arms of the left in the West as a whole. There are some exceptions, but and this is why it's really terrible, because what it means is that people aren't being exposed to opposing arguments. You absolutely, in order to have a civilized society, there has to be some place in the middle where people meet. And what happens is when you kick all the people who are challenging the leftist narrative off the platforms, then the left becomes these platforms become a giant leftist echo chamber. And then you can further demonize people, because you can dehumanize people when they're not right in front of you, right? You can dehumanize people when they're distant. If you're actually sitting and breaking bread with them and having conversations with them, it's pretty hard to demonize people as much, right? And so they're hollowing out the middle. They're pushing everyone to the extremes, and they do that because it's like if you take the keystone of an arch out, the whole arch collapses. So they're driving people like myself, and I guess you, Alesh, and maybe you, Tomaž, as well. They're driving us out because we are the connecting tissue between these two ideologies. There's things on the right I like and don't like. There's things on the left I like and don't like. I criticize the left because they have the most power at the moment. If it was the right that had the most power, then I would be criticizing the right. But we are trying to find facts, reason, and evidence and moral arguments. You know, people on the left would say, yeah, I don't want my kids pushing people and taking their stuff, even if their parents make more money than my kid, right? I don't want, okay, so there's a principle we can all get behind. We don't want to use force to get what we want, and we can start to build on that and have a rational, peaceful discussion about these things. But, you know, we get kicked out and people flock to the extremes. The time for arguments is perceived to be past. Things escalate. And it's no accident that when people like me get kicked off social media, you end up with some weird guy in a shaman suit with a Viking helmet strolling through the Capitol. Like, it's almost by design because they've given up on reasonable arguments, and it's hard to argue with that sometimes. So, yeah, they're not free market entities at all. It's sort of like saying that when BMW or other companies were building warplanes for the Nazis or whatever they did, right? That these companies were it's just a free market entity. It's like, no, they're building warplanes for a totalitarian state. And that's not a free market situation. Just because they're being paid by stolen money, that's like saying that, somebody selling stolen goods is a totally free market situation. It's like, well, no, the fact that the goods are stolen is kind of important there. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I'd say that
Yeah.
the eyes of the world are again on United States, because what is happening there is a reaction that you don't get anywhere else in the world. So I don't know how much you know the European conditions, but we have a thing called free speech here that is quite limited. Yeah. It's limited by a definition of hate speech, something that you Americans never had. So here, we had in Slovenia, we had a situation where a rock concert was banned due to ideology of the singer, and book presentations were banned. And these are official government acts that were later found to be illegal, but still they banned it. We have situation where people are put to jail for saying things that are not inciting of violence, that are not inciting of criminal acts, that are simply ideologically problematic. And what I see in America is that Europe has come to you only as it would be for as it would be appropriate for America. It didn't come through the government because you have the Constitution. It came through the corporations. Yeah. So the corporations are the thing that is destroying freedom of America and changing America into I would say Europe. In terms of Alesh said previously that that the left used to hate corporations. Yeah, but the globalization has changed. The globalization 10, 15 years ago was about free market, about passing the ideas, about passing the goods, about abandoning tariffs. The globalization of today is about central government. It's about the central power structures that limit national states. So that's what happened, and that is why the left now loves globalization, because it's not the same globalization as before. But let
me just mention one thing before I go, and I'm sorry, I just wanted to drop in, but one thing I wanted to mention here as well is that the punishments in America are far harsher than those in Europe, and that's something I just want to make a sort of brief case for, because in Europe, they'll run to the government and, you might be dragged in front of a court and then maybe at the end of it, and I know jail is kind of an unusual outcome for these kinds of things, but maybe you have to pay, I don't know, €5,000 fine, €10,000 fine. Now that's a lot of money, but that's it, right? Whereas in America, because the Supreme Court has denied the existence of hate speech, what they do is, because they can't achieve the silencing of you through the courts, they will try to deplatform you from everywhere, completely destroy your source of income, which ends up costing you a whole lot more than €5,000 or €10,000. And so the punishments in America, because it has a First Amendment, the punishments in America for wrongthink vastly exceed in general the punishments in Europe, because people's entire livelihoods get destroyed. And that's a whole lot different from a fine from some regulatory agency. So the idea that America is a bastion of free speech, it is the very free speech elements embedded in the Constitution that have made the punishment so wildly out of proportion to, people who, I saw a video from Ezra Levant. He's the leader of a news group in Canada called Rebel News. And they just got demonetized from YouTube, and his claim is that it's $400,000 a year that they were gaining from monetization. So of course they asked YouTube and said, well, we got 15,000 videos, which one was the problem? They wouldn't tell them. Is there any appeal? No. Can I talk to someone higher up? Yeah, we'll see about that. And of course we all know what that means, a polite way of saying no, right? Now, can you imagine if Ezra Levant's group had said something that ended up being found to be hate speech, and the punishment was a perpetual fine of $400,000 a year? I mean, that would be so astonishingly wrong, and it would be a cruel and unusual punishment, right? Mm-hmm. So he didn't get hauled up on hate speech charges, and if he had, then it probably would have been a fine, and I don't know, but it certainly wouldn't have been $400,000 a year in perpetuity. Right, so the legal mechanisms for silencing people tend to be far less harsh economically than the deplatforming stuff that has that occurs. So I understand in Europe, you look at America and you say, wow, it's really nice to have a First Amendment and so on. And I get all of that. And for sure, America, of course, having a First Amendment becomes a much bigger target for the leftists. And they do worse things in many ways than the government ever could, because if you had violated some hate speech law and they fined you $400,000 in perpetuity, that would be considered excessive, cruel, and unusual punishment, and you could appeal that, and so on. On the other hand, if the leftists target, say, YouTube and get you demonetized, which costs you $400,000 a year in perpetuity, well, that's that's just what happens. And so that punishment, which could not be inflicted in a court of law, is regularly inflicted by this kind of social media pressure and deplatforming. So it's not a whole lot better in non-European countries in that way.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. I'm sorry to jump in and jump out, but my absolute sympathies as a guy who's gone through, 5 years of deplatforming off and on, mostly on. I know it's tough at the time, and I sympathize with it, and it's a big shock, and maybe it feels like the end of the world. The lifeboats are a lot less comfortable than the Titanic, because the Titanic's got these big couches and fireplaces and musicians and great food and buffets and all of that, and the lifeboats, they got hard benches and it's kind of cold and there's no shelter, but the mainstream is going down. I mean, this just can't survive. I mean, particularly post-Trump, right? Now, of course, they're selling the fear porn of coronavirus from here to eternity, but unfortunately, we have a business model wherein human beings respond the most to fear, and so fear baiting and fear clicking is just driving people to insane lengths. But, if somebody gets you off the Titanic early, it feels pretty bad until you see the Titanic going down, and the mainstream culture is unfortunately rotted from the inside out. And if there is it's the old saying that Winston Smith believed, falsely it turned out, but I think true, if there's hope in 1984, if there's hope, it lies in the proles. And if there's hope for us, it lies in decentralized, Bitcoin-based, crypto, Lightning networks. And that's where the future is. And I think you'll look back and say, okay, so the people who paid me in decaying fiat currency aren't paying me anymore, so it meant I had to go to this other place where I gained a lot more value through crypto. So that's certainly my encouragement to start looking into that kind of stuff. And I think you'll look at it as a benefit, although I totally get it. It doesn't feel like that at the moment. All right. Take care, guys. Keep me posted.
Thank you, Stefan.
All the very
Thanks
best.
for stopping by. I will.
Okay, bye.
I will. Take care. Bye, Stefan. Bye. Vračamo se v slovenščino. Se opravičujem za tale ekskurs v anglosaksonščino. Pardon, Tomaž. Kje so? Aha, se v bistvu lahko nadaljujem, ker sem te mislil še nekaj vprašati v zvezi s tem, o čemer smo mi. Samo trenutek, tam sem zasledil eno dobro vprašanje. Ne najdem ga več. Vrniva se k našemu fašizmu. Tole je zanimiva zadeva. Kaj bi ti rekel, bi pritrdil tej hipotezi, da je ekonomski fašizem, se pravi to, kako se lotiš gospodarstva, ali pa da je v bistvu prevalentna oblika načrtovanja gospodarstva v svetu danes in je vsaj v ekonomskem smislu, mi živimo fašizem. Bi rekel, da je to pretirana hipoteza, da bi jo bilo treba vse malo boljše razdelati?
Ne, jaz mislim, da je to zelo točno. Ne. Težava vseh teh ideologij, ne, kot so socializem, fašizem, nacizem in tako dalje, ne, je, da se zdijo, ne, grozljivo normalne, ne, ko stopiš stik z njimi. Ne. Naprimer, če bi ti živel v Nemčiji v 30-ih, ne, tebe ne bi prepričevali s tem, da bi ti rekli, da bojo odprli koncentracijska taborišča pa tam ljudi pobijali. Ne, tebe bi prepričevali s tem, da bojo naredili socialna partnerstva, da bojo zvišali plače, da bojo za vse službe naredili, da bo država zaplenila tovarne, razdelila delavce in tako dalje. Ne. In seveda v tem smislu, ne, je zelo težko določenim ljudem dojeti, ne, da fašizem v resnici ni to, kar mi govorimo. Ne. Fašizem je v bistvu neizmernost tega, kar mi počnemo. Ne. A veš, fašist in socialist lahko govorita eno in isto stvar, ne, ampak eden izmed njih bo šel precej daleč, drugi bo pa ostal, ne, na tisti stopnji. Ne. In resničen fašizem se od liberalizma oziroma od demokratičnih sistemov loči predvsem po praksi, ne po teoriji. Ne. In v teoriji je seveda danes sistem, ki ga imamo v večini evropskih držav, skoraj čista slika Mussolinijeve utopije. Ne. To je, Mussolini je imel tisto utopijo o tretji smeri, ki jo je potem Anthony Giddens predelal v tretjo pot, ne. To je smer med komunizmom pa med kapitalizmom. Ne. Mussolini je sanjal socialna partnerstva, Mussolini je celo v nekem trenutku ustanovil italijansko socialno republiko. Ne. Vse te stvari so seveda grozljivo podobne današnjim in tisto, kar je te sisteme res razlikovalo, je bilo predvsem neizmerna praksa, predvsem to, kar so počeli v praksi. Ne. Tako da jaz bi mogoče rekel, da fašist je tisti, ki deluje kot fašist, ne tisti, ki nekaj govori. Ne. Se pravi, če gledamo, kdo prepoveduje koncerte, kdo prepoveduje predstavitve knjig, kdo preganja ljudi, kdo jih meče iz služb. Ne. A veš, se zelo hitro lahko zavemo, kdo ima več fašističnih praks v sebi. Ne. Kdo se oblači v črne srajce pa ustrahuje ljudi na ulici. Ne. Kdo izvaja medijske likvidacije. Ne. Zelo hitro priješ do tega, da še tako mehko govoreči ljudje, ne, imajo lahko zelo, zelo fašistične navade. Ne.
Ja, prav neverjetno. Kaj ti misliš o tem iskreno? Smo na desnici, bodi si gre za ekonomsko desnico, bodi si kulturno, tako zelo ali toliko bolj nagnjeni k zagovoru svobode govora ali pa k proponiranju svobode govora, ker je pač the matter of the fact, da je desnica v tem obdobju zgodovine pomaknjena na margine, to je, da imajo povsod po svetu levičarji medijske monopole, pa bi se v nas nekaj preklopilo, če bi na neki točki desnica prevzela ta monopol, pa bi tudi mi začeli nenadoma veliko pogosto, pa mogoče celo enako kot oni, cenzurirati?
Mislim, da pač jaz sem libertarec, ne, jaz vem, da moč korumpira, ne. In mislim, da je to, da smo mi v tej edinstveni poziciji, ko nas de facto že nekoliko, oziroma nekatere celo čist konkretno preganjajo, kot je Stefan prej rekel, ne. Mi smo že v tej situaciji, ne, in jasno, da se v tej situaciji borimo za svobodo govora, ker je govor tisto edino, kar še ostane, ne, da lahko govarjaš temu, ne. Če še govor vzamejo, ko boš pa pol protestiral proti temu, ne. In te bojo zbrisali, ne. Ja, tako da tako, se strinjam, ne.
Ja.
Nekako strinjam, da smo mi bolj nagnjeni k svobodi. Veš, kako bom rekel, ne. Vedno, ne, z političnimi spremembami, ne, vedno stoji interes, ne. In en velik problem, ki ga imajo ljudje, je razumeti, da so vsi interesi legalni, da se vsak bori za svoje, ne. In da se za svobodo govora borijo pač tisti, ki imajo kaj zapovedati, ne. Tako kot se za neko gradnjo projekta bori pač tisti, ki bi rad gradil ta projekt, ne. Veš, ne. In zato ni nič narobe, da se mi zavzemamo za svobodo govora, ker bi pač radi svobodno govorili, ne. To je povsem legitimen interes, ne. In ja, zato to počnemo, ne.
To je res zadnje vprašanje, zadnja špekulacija, če se malo vrnem na začetek in tega Doma Saviča, ker kot so se pogovarjali, preden so šla veter, oziroma sem jaz govoril o tebi, meni je vedno znova fascinantno, da naletim na ljudi, ki se ne želijo razumem, da kdaj pri kom narediš slab prvi vtis, pa se distancira od tebe in se ne želi pogovarjati. Ampak ljudje, ki a priori rečejo, mislim, jaz nikoli v življenju nisem rekel, jaz se s Tanjo Fajon ne bi pogovarjal, ali pa z Luko Mescem se ne bi pogovarjal. Nikoli mi na pamet ni prišlo kaj takega, ne. Tem ljudem pa očitno res misliš, da je to izraz iskrenega strahu pred nami, ali so pač to ljudje, smo popolnoma drugačno mentaliteto, strenirani, čisto strateško poučeni o tem, kako se pač politiko dela. Mi pa smo mi desničarski polaktivisti, pa smo pač naivci, ki smo vleteli v tole zgodbo.
Domen je radikaliziran, ne? In ko je nekdo radikaliziran, tako sveto prepričan svoj prav, ne? Seveda deluje skladno s tem, ne? In jaz bi lahko zdaj na široko razpredal domno, ampak imam eno retorično vprašanje, pa eno vprašanje, ne? Retorično vprašanje, zakaj bi jaz zgubil čas z Domnom Savičem, ne? Vprašanje pa, zakaj bi se ti pogovarjal z njim, če se on s tabo noče, ne? Kdo pa je Domen Savič? Ne?
Res je. Da ne bi bilo pomote, ne moledujem tukaj, pa da me ne bo kdo obtožil, da jočem, zakaj se Domen Savič ne želi z mano pogovarjati. Preprosto izrazil sem fascinacijo nad tem, ker jaz sem se od nekdaj pač z vsemi želel pogovarjati. Če mene nekaj moti, grem do človeka, ga pocukam za rokav, ga vprašam, če slišim o nekom nekaj, grem do njega, ga vprašam. Ne vem, tako živim že vso življenje, ampak očitno je, da vsi ljudje pa ne. Kakorkoli, Tomaž, ura pa pol je že mimo, kar preletela je zadeva. Stefan je tudi bil precej gostobeseden. Kakšna zaključna misel o antifašistični histeriji? Slišim ali malo berem, da najbrž se je interpelacija izšla dobro za Simonitija, no kljub temu, da so zlorabili mojo sekundno sekvenco za boj proti njemu.
Ja, ne. Dve tezi, ne, za zaključek, ne, pa bo malo daljši, upam, da ne zameraš, ne. To se pravi, že prej sem omenil, da je precejšen del antifašizma je oportunizem, ne. To se pravi, da je to ideologija, ne, ki pač ne verjame v nič, to je neizprosen boj proti nekemu neobstoječemu sovražniku, ne, za dober državni denar, ne, to je antifašizem in načel, ne. Ima pa ta histerija, ne, tega fašizma, ki znova dviguje glavo, ne, ima tudi svoje žrtve, ne, in sicer to je v bistvu tudi neka psihoza, ne, za nestabilne, ne, ki iščejo svojo identiteto, ne, in pač želijo vdihniti svojemu življenju nek smisel znotraj nekih velikih bojev in nekih davnih mitologij, ne. In taki izgubljeni ljudje se v stiski zmeraj zatečejo recimo temu najmanjšemu skupnemu imenovalcu, ne. In zdaj, če bi oni odraščali v srednjem veku, ne, bi se v stiski zatekli k materi cerkvi, ne, ker so pa odraščali v SFRJ, ne, se pa zatekajo k mitologiji in ideologiji socializma in antifašizma, ne. In rekel bi, da hvala Bogu, da ti ljudje živijo v razvitem svetu, ne, in da se grejo lahko vse te bitke v njihovih glavah in iz svojih domačih foteljev, ne. Zdaj, za konec bi pa samo eno tezo razvil, ne, pa mogoče lahko kdaj pogovarjamo o njej, ne. Še eno tezo, ki je pa teza, zakaj je v Sloveniji antifašizem, tako imenovani antifašizem, tako pomemben, ne, ki je malo drugačna od tega, zakaj se to v tujini dogaja, ne. V Sloveniji se mi zdi, da bi zgodovino od 46. do 91. najraje zbrisali, ne. Oziroma, ne, če že ne moramo zbrisati, ne, bi se radi saj pretvarjali, da je bil to pač tisti čas, ko smo, ne vem, ko smo ves čas samo pili kokto in jedli smoki, ne, pa nas celo noben, tako kot Simone Kustec, ni spraševal, kdo na to plača, ne. In mi bi se temu obdobju najraje izognili zato, ne, ker smo hladno vojno izgubili, ne, in ne, ker zgodovino pišejo zmagovalci, ne. Zmagovalca hladne vojne sta pa Reagan in Thatcherjeva, in ona dva sta odločila, da je socializem slab, ne. In zato se mi zdaj pretvarjamo, da hladne vojne ali ni konc, da je nismo izgubili, ali pa da smo še vedno v 45 in da smo pravzaprav še vedno zavezniki z ZDA v nekakšnem skupnem protifašističnem boju, ne, neko iluzijo imamo, ne. In čeprav v bistvu pol stoletja nismo bili zavezniki z ZDA, mi smo bili njihovi nasprotniki ali pa nekateri bi rekli neuvrščeni, ne, ampak neuvrščeni je bilo vedno samo, a veš, drugo ime za koalicijo socialistov iz druge lige in ljudožercev iz Afrike, ne, veš. In zato, ker bi radi vse to obdobje zgodovine pozabili, zato je tudi takšen napor v določenih smerih, da se ljudi prevzgoji in da se jim glavo izpere z neumnostmi, ne. Naprimer, neumnosti, kot jih slišimo, da je bil za osamosvojitev najbolj zaslužen Avnoj, ne, da so imeli veliko pri osamosvajanju tudi razne čebine, pa razne menine, planine, ne. Ta napor, ne, da se ustvari nekakšno kontinuiteto iz 1945 za danes, ima en cilj, ne, da se izbriše tisto najpomembnejše, kar se je zgodilo vmes, ne. Zato, ne, da se prevara to pravilo, ne, da zgodovino pišejo zmagovalci, ne, oziroma da se ga dopolni tako, ne, da zgodovino zdaj pišejo predzadnji zmagovalci, ne, to se pravi oni iz 45, ne pa lih tisti iz 91, zaradi tega takrat so socialisti izgubili, ne. In temu je vse to namenjen. Zbrisati hladno vojno, ni je bilo, nismo izgubili, mi smo zmagovalci, zdaj je leto 45, borimo se proti fašizmu naprej. To je cilj, to je politični cilj, to želijo doseči, to želijo plasirati v glave ljudi in to je noro. Ne.
Noro, prav zares. Jaz sem za danes tako rekoč ostal brez besed. Tomaž, počaščen sem, ker si bil moj gost. Hvala, ker si sogostoval s Stefanom Molinjujem. Najbrž se v Sloveniji še nikoli nista pojavila na tak majhnem prostoru dva tako eminentna libertarca. In čast mi je bilo, hvala gledalcem za komentarje, berem vas, mnogi ste vrhunski, vaš humor obožujem. Lep večer želim, lahko noč, tistim, ki ste v kakšnih oddaljenejših krajih, pa še lep dan naprej. Tomaž, hvala še enkrat.
Hvala lepa. Lahko noč.
Lahko noč.